Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Horse Races Now podcast. Kenny, it looks like you might be in Lexington right now. So are you at Magdalena?
I am. I'm at Magdalena Farm. I don't know. Have we ever done a walk around here?
We have. Place is beautiful.
Yeah. All right. The short-term memory there. Forgot. But yeah, we've got a lovely group of horses here. Have for a long time, and we're this time of year we've got a lot of young horses if they've got shins or things like that come through here, and we've got a few mares that are still foaling and getting bred. So there's a bit of action going on here, and it's all good.
Awesome. Gotta love that. All right, so Kenny, it's been a week or so since we've checked in here. Why don't you give us an update on the highlights here, on kind of the main names? So how's Thorpedo come out of her last race? Obviously she got bumped and there was a little bit of concerns. Where do we stand there?
Well, she's come out of a race fine. We've got a couple of easy half miles into her since her last race, and then we are pointing her towards the Locust Grove, the Fleur de Lis on the 28th of June at Churchill.
Okay.
So it's a long season, and we're more worried about the second half at this stage. And that's a race that's there in her home court at Churchill, and should be a race that we could hopefully get her back on track. That last race was very disappointing for me as much as anybody, but
yeah.
It happens, and it's a big boy sport, and you have to take the losses with the wins, of course.
Sure.
But we're optimistic we get her back to her old game, and that should be a big weekend. We've also got the Stephen Foster that weekend, which I know will lead into talking about Mystik Dan, who's running Saturday.
Okay.
I mean, this horse is doing as well as ever, and we're pretty confident that we're going to have him back in a winning way this coming weekend. I mean, it's not an easy race, but none of them are. But I'd love to see him, jump through this older horse hoop and then go from there. But he's at his home track again, and Brian's back on him, and it's an exciting Saturday.
It's been a little bit since Mystik Dan's hit the board, so hopefully he gets back into some winning ways here.
Well, he was second in his last race, just beating an Austral.
Oh, okay.
At Oaklawn. Actually, that was Kentucky Derby day, and we ran him at Oaklawn.
That's right.
Day.
That's right.
That race was a little under the radar because it was at Oaklawn, but that race was actually on paper was his fastest race of his life.
Wow.
So we've got him back going, and my team Brian's been getting on him. Said he worked fantastic last weekend, and then Robbie Alvarado continues to gallop him daily and says he's never felt better. So we're hopeful that we get this horse back to grade 1 level.
All right, I have a rendered judgment question from one of our listeners.
Mm-hmm.
So you had mentioned how rendered judgment has very large hoofs, and that doesn't take mud well. Have you ever thought about running him on the turf?
Yeah, we have. It's not out of the question. At some point, we probably will do that. He's continued to have these quarter cracks to be addressed by Ian McKinley. And, that's one of those deals where you're just trying to keep him from becoming a bigger problem. But the quarter cracks haven't bothered him soundness wise, but they're these are tricky. Quarter cracks are like fingerprints, that they're all different. And you're really at the mercy of your blacksmith. If they do a great job with those, then they're not a problem, but sometimes they become a problem.
Right.
But we've had to wait since his last race. We did some more adjustments, and he's going to probably get a breeze. He's at Saratoga right now, so he's going to work over the Saratoga Oklahoma track this weekend. Probably just take him an easy 3/8 and out an 1/8, and then ease him back into a next start, which will probably be a straight 3-year-old allowance race. But a grass race isn't out of the question at all.
Now, is it true that horses that have large hoofs typically may like the turf more?
I do think that's the case. It just depends on the angles and the pedigree. He's by Blame, and Blame is not necessarily considered a grass horse or grass stallion. He's out of a commissioner mare, which is, I believe there's Stormcat on the sideline. I don't know that his pedigree says he's got turf or going to be a turf horse, but we definitely, we like to try different things with young horses, and he is still young, so it's not out of the question that we shift over to the grass, and he may love it.
I've always wondered how you make that decision, and you just made the comment about having turf in your pedigree. It just it seems like, I guess, from a very basic standpoint, you just watch them run, and they like the turf better than the dirt, then so be it. But so pedigree has something to do with that on whether or not you would run them on the turf.
Well, so a lot of the European female families are historic turf families.
Okay.
You also get horses that are made certain ways that are grass horses, whether it's the length of their pastern, the angles of their hooves, the length of their hind leg, and of course, we could separate those into sprinters or routers. But I do think that there's a certain pattern to the way a horse's foot's made, and that adapts better to turf. For example, they have what they call in Europe, they call them box-footed horses. Here we call them club-footed,
Okay.
where the heels are contracted and they're tight and they're brought in. Those horses do well in the dirt. And like, for example, this Mr. Prospector line had a lot of more contracted heel type horses, but they won on the turf as well in Europe on occasion. I believe Dubai Millennium is a horse that's through that sire line, but it's all, they're all different. I mean, being that the thoroughbred's a hybrid, it makes a difference on how, where the lines come from. But I don't think it's ever, for me, it's not a big deal to make an effort to try a horse on the turf. There are some that I think there's no chance they're going to be grass horses because of their conformation. But in some cases you don't know till you try a horse.
Yeah. Amen to that. Okay. So a couple questions we have coming in from our listeners. This is one I'm really kind of curious about too. So I'll read the entire question here. So Kenny, looking from a business management standpoint, how many crew members work for you? And from a profit and loss standpoint, what percentage of the earnings goes to just cover labor and the fringes of the business?
Okay, so we typically have a groom for every 4 horses. Many of those, or some of those, are visa workers. We keep a rider for every 6 to 8, depending on the setup. We keep a hot walker for typically every 4 or 5. An assistant foreman for every 20 or so. And then it's a profit sharing business where when we win a race, we pass the earnings down from a race, and we keep track of each race and who was the groom and who was the rider and who's the assistant, who was the hot walker. So they get bonused off that. And then we typically do that twice a year. And that's actually never black and white, because sometimes horses will move from one division to another division. So you have to adjust or even share it out and split it. Sometimes the horse has been prepared by one assistant trainer, and sometimes it's been saddled by another one, and so there's a lot of movement in the horses. So none of that's black and white, but we work hard to try to pass all that down, and it's typically a percent to each groom, rider, assistant, and then go from there.
So the second part of that question is: it seems that the operation is huge, and I would echo that sentiment. I mean, all the different areas and farms and barns that you guys control. From a
Hmm.
financial point of view, is it hard to sustain a profitable operation, especially if horses are not winning?
Um, Goodness, over the course of my career, I started with 3 horses. I can remember when I got up to 8 and I was getting $23 a day. Uh, when you did the math on that, you couldn't hardly afford a groom or a hot walker. I would groom myself, walk myself. This is back in my 20s. Of course, I was much thinner, and that's a completely different era.
Yeah, I
But
gotcha.
as the business has grown, and in all honesty, I'm a little bit like, at this stage, it's kind of a catch-22. With all that we've got going on between the Derby and the Oaks, and we've had this Netflix series, and
Mm-hmm.
the podcast is popular, I
Yep,
assume.
it is.
Then there are a lot of people that contact me about helping them handle horses. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. I like helping people. At the same time, you don't want to get overloaded too much. But what I've really tried to do is to surround myself with fantastically talented people that I can communicate with and work with in alignment of getting the right job done. And it's a fine line between being hands on and two hands off, and the assistance that I have on one hands on, and then when I need to be hands on, I can. Like, for example, I was at Keeneland this morning and I'm checking shins and I'm looking at legs and I'm watching horses go and I'm, doing that. And the day before I was at Silverleaf and we were there 3 days. I was there 3 days and watched all those young horses go and checking legs and shins and all those things. And then I bounced like Monday. I'm leaving for Saratoga. Tomorrow I'm at Churchill. So the dynamic it's changed. Profitability, in all honesty, at this stage in my career, when I was getting $23 a day, I was starving and I wasn't making any money. And I do think that there was a period in my career I was really struggling to make ends meet. Even today, cash flow on a large business like this is significant. It's a constant battle. You're working to get paid by those that you handle the horses for. Then you're working to get your blacksmiths paid, your feed companies paid. The cash flow is enormous every month, well over $1 million a month. And then it's a matter of trying to keep up with all that and balancing it all. And sometimes you get divisions that are like a larger division. I don't think has any problem with profitability if you've got the right people there. A smaller division, you might have too much help, and then you're unable to balance that division. But then you've got to figure out, what you've got to do to make it balance. I'm fortunate. My background, I did have quite a bit of accounting at UK, and so I can look at whether it's a check register, accounts payables or receivables, and a balance sheet, and figure out whether or not we're going in the right direction.
Right.
But it's the farms that we have are big assets. Like, we can run the business out of here at Magdalena. Lauren Prosciutto and Alan Shell are just outside this door here, and they're digging into all those details, and they realize the balls we have to juggle. And for example, we get clipping bills from people, we get shoeing bills, and then we have to re-invoice that out to the clientele, and then we have to collect that before we get that money back out to our vendors. So the business aspect is a really serious part of what we do. I mean, you could be the greatest horseman in the world, and if you're a poor businessman, you're out of business. And I do think that if you are great with horses, then certainly need to surround yourself with someone that knows how to balance a checkbook and the taxes and the workman's comp. You can't imagine all the things that come with it. And with us with properties, we've got property tax, we've got repairs, fencing, trucks, trailers, but we keep a task list of all that, and then I delegate that out to Greg Moorhead is operations director operations here in Kentucky, and then Kevin Ryan is directing operations in Silverleaf. So yeah, you know what, we've got a lot of things going on, but I tell you, I feel real confident that we're checking every box, crossing every T, dotting every I.
So, Kenny, do you keep, all right, so obviously you have Magdalena, which is Lexington, you have Silverleaf, which is in Florida. Now, we've also seen tours of all these different barns, whether it's Churchill, Saratoga, Keeneland, Oaklawn, wherever it may be, fairgrounds. Now, do you keep stables at all these tracks year round, or are these seasonal? How does that work for you?
Okay, so Churchill Downs, which is what I call the base of our really good horses, which Dan and Anna are both there. Um, Greg Geyer runs that barn, and he runs it like a Swiss watch. And I call him early in the morning and always joke, "Did you show up? Making sure you showed up." And of course, he's Mister Clock, like clockwork.
Right.
And so I'll show you an example. So this is the set list for Churchill for this morning.
Okay.
And so I print these every day. And then I go through what everybody's doing. I usually do it either the night before or the morning of, and or I'll check in and say who you breezing, what time, and then we talk about the details. In this column here are race dates, and so horses over here,
Okay.
grooms, riders, what their program is for the day, and then race dates.
Okay.
And so I'll adjust these race dates at the end of the morning. I'll go through them and make sure we're all on the right page. Um, condition book. Like this is the entries for today. Actually, that's yesterday. These are entries for today.
Okay.
And so I have to go over these to make sure that Greg got his deal. And then at Belmont, Jimmy Jerkins, if for those who don't know, Jimmy's running Belmont, and he's up to about looks like about 16 or 17 up there. And same thing, details. Saratoga, we just settled in. We've got 7. So Francisco Serrano's worked for me several years now. He's up there. Same thing. All this is very well structured. Silverleaf, which I just got back from. Silverleaf is they're still 62-year-olds down there. Same setup as you can see the details. And then I've made decisions on this side. Couple going to New York, couple going to Kentucky. Actually, a truckload going to Kentucky to get to the backside. There's a few that are going to go. We're going to send a string to Colonial later in the summer. And every division's run on a structure. We have SOPs for the way that the process of the morning goes, and then the staff, they can adjust the feed program on a horse, they can adjust the training program of a horse. None of that is structured in the sense that none of that's black and white. It's all gray, and it's dependent on the day, how a horse warms up, what stage they're in, whether they ate the night before. Like I get feed reports from each division every day. Magdalena. So Alan Shell is the farm manager here and stable manager and a bit of a jack of all trades for me. But a lot of these are mares and foals. Like for example, Mystik Dan's mother is in barn 2. Let's see. Yeah, she's in barn 2, stall 3. And
Okay.
so she foaled Mystik Dan here. And so we've got our hand on who the mares are bred to. Alan does the bookings. I help make decisions on whether I think a mare needs to be bred to a certain type of stallion. Like for example, we had one mare that's having a hard time getting in foal to Rock Your World, so we contacted Spendthrift today and we shifted her over to Golden Sense. And she's been bred 3 or 4 times to Rock Your World, but she hadn't been able to catch. And usually this is Alan's department. He's hitting those details, and then I give him direction on who I think that mare needs to be bred to. But I enjoy that side of it. I actually I started on probably more on the breeding side of it than the training side of it. And then Magdalena's also got a list of what we call, we have the arena barn, which is a lot of layups, and we can tell what time, like if a horse is coming off shins or a tibia or any small surgeries, P1 surgeries, then we put a return to training date on here. I don't know if you can see some of those, but those return to training dates tell us what day that horse is headed back to the track. And then we have x-ray, like you want to re-x-ray a horse. Here's one that needs your shins done. There's all kinds of details on here, but everybody's in their own zone on what they're supposed to do.
Kenny,
And then
we're in like, I don't know, we're in the 50 range of how many podcasts we've done. So I've got a pretty good understanding of kind of what your business is. You just kind of blew my mind at how much you have to juggle on a daily basis. That's insane.
I liken it to waking up and doing the New York Times crossword puzzle every morning with horses.
Yeah.
It's a lot of decision making. We're unique in that there probably isn't anybody in the nation that does it this way. I mean, I don't know how it's evolved into this way, other than that's just kind of. I mean, I enjoy it.
Sure.
It's challenging sometimes. We probably need to keep a cap on the quality of horse we have, because I want higher quality horses. We don't want to get overwhelmed with lower quality horses, which that's a day rate issue. The more you charge, probably the better horses you get. At the same time, you've got to analyze each horse as an individual, and that's an ongoing process. But more than anything, I'm really fortunate. I've surrounded and I've worked really hard to surround myself with good quality people, with no dysfunctional behavior. We don't tolerate, alcoholism, tardiness. everybody understands their position. And we work to be very clear about it. And truth is we have very, very few issues with all that at this stage. When I was younger, it seemed like it was a lot harder. Today, I've just got some fantastic people, and we've got a woman named Margaret Wilson who helps us with our visas. The people with the visa workers are fantastic. They're good, hardworking. Um, Most of the people that work for us are Catholic in that they, Mexico or
Mm-hmm.
Guatemala.
Mm-hmm.
They're fantastic horse people, diligent, on time. Just really, in many ways, enjoy working with them a lot. And then that's been a real big difference too. The Martha helping bring them in, but and that's a constant. You have to have great help.
Pretty incredible. Okay, so and I don't know that you may have answered the question in there, Kenny, but when I asked about kind of all the stables that you keep at these different racetracks, is that something you keep year round?
Well, it migrates north to south. So Saratoga and Belmont, we're not typically in New York until spring, summer, and fall.
Ah, okay.
Then when winter comes, those horses migrate south, most of them,
I gotcha.
and then I'm a stalwart at Keeneland Churchill during the spring and fall, and then we will participate pretty significantly at Ellis Park and Kentucky Downs in the summer and the fall. And then when winter comes, um, for 30 years I was every year I went to Gulfstream Park, Gulfstream
Mm-hmm.
in Hallandale Beach, Florida.
Yep.
I've had a huge amount of success in Gulfstream Park, but in the last several 3 to 5 years, 3 or 4 years, I've shifted from Gulfstream to a strong base at the fairgrounds
Okay.
and a strong base at Oaklawn.
Okay.
And we did send some horses back to Gulfstream this year, and I anticipate sending more to Gulfstream next year. I'm really worried about this thing going on with fairgrounds. Um, that is a really historic racetrack, and that's going to really disrupt our operation
Yeah.
if they don't sort that out.
Understood.
Um, yeah, I mean, I'm optimistic they will. I can't comprehend or imagine that they don't. But if it does change things, um, it will be an upheaval of a lot of people.
Can you give
Um,
our listeners a little rundown of what's going on there?
well, Churchill Downs didn't apply for dates. They're the owner of Fairgrounds. I don't know the politics of it all, but I know that they were hoping to get on the ballots HHR, which is historical horse racing, which has been a game changer in the state of Kentucky. And we have been really rewarded here in Kentucky for HHR. And if they could get that in Louisiana, it would be a game changer there. It would lift and really elevate the purse structure. And I think Churchill is doing everything in their power to try to get that done. And like I said, I don't know all the details so much as um, they didn't apply for dates because they didn't get the approvals,
Right.
and there's going to be a cut in purses down there, um, or they may not race at all.
Yeah.
And so, what would happen? Maybe we would shift some horses to Texas, to Sam Houston. Maybe some to California. I don't know. But for an operation like myself that has a lot of young horses that need prepared in warmer weather, we may end up with more horses in Florida, and then maybe even Tampa.
Interesting.
So this is typical for decades. Horse racing it's a constant moving um, target.
Okay.
And there was a day when Gulfstream was the only place and best place to be in racing. And then, um, you know, California's had its heyday, but they've got their own struggles. But more than anything, racing in Kentucky and Arkansas and certainly Saratoga is stronger than ever. And so we'll probably migrate to those areas. And you've got to go where the best purses are, and you've got to go where your clientele wants to race. And that's a constant movement too.
Got it. Well, that was all very well put. All right, one more question, then we're gonna get you out of here. Because two more actually, and then we do have a listener, and I want to make sure that they understand that I'm not ignoring this. But there's a listener that wants you to go pretty deep into an episode on how horses are fed and the supplements that you give them, and then maybe show kind of how you guys do that per horse, and how these how these horses are fed and built. So we'll do that in a later episode, but I wanted to make sure you weren't forgotten there. All
Well,
right.
let me touch on it.
Okay.
Years back, when I first started training, we would get crimped oats, whole oats. We would get sweet feed. You would store molasses in your tack room. You would have salt, um, bran. You had to mix your own feed.
Okay.
And so over the course of my career, I actually had a conversation with Lee Hall, and Lee Hall is the the founder of Hallway Feed. And I said, wouldn't it be great if they could mix all this, pre-mix it so it had all the right supplements, it had all the salts, it had the right balance of protein. Um, Lee put together a feed that we have fed exclusively for 3 decades.
Wow.
And yeah, it really does relieve us of we aren't a heavy supplement racing outfit. We feed hallway. We trust in the hallway. On a rare occasion, a horse won't eat it. Most all of them do. Um, it's a feed that I really count on. Hallway Race 13. This isn't an advertisement, I swear. But I like using it. My horses like eating it, and they run like the wind on it. And we don't throw a lot of things. We might use some GastroGuard. We might use a little bodybuilder here and there. I'm not a big supplements person. I've spent a career trying a little bit this, that, and everything. And when I say that, like a lot of people come and put different supplements in front of you and say this will help one breathe, this will help one get stronger. I've always believed that buy a really good horse, keep them under a very simple system, don't complicate it, feed them proper, feed them well, pay attention that they're eating, pay attention to their teeth, make sure they've got good quality hay, fresh water, constant fresh water, unlimited hay water. Bed them deep where they've got a good place to rest at the end of the day, and a good horse will show up. And it's not about supplements. It's not about anything fancy. It's about consistency. It's about just keeping it steady. It's about paying attention when things aren't right. And any feed program that I could explain to this person wouldn't be overly complicated. We feed at 3:30 in the morning every division, 2 quarts. At 10:30 we typically feed 4 quarts. At 4:30 sharp every day, and I'm all about the timing. I think timing's good. We feed typically 6 quarts, sometimes 8 for a strong doer, sometimes 4 for a horse that's overweight. Um, typical though is 6, 3 level scoops. I like a round 2 quart scoop. I don't like the handle scoops. I want it round. I want it leveled off, poured in, so that you have the amounts correctly. And then, like I said, you pay attention. If a horse needs more, fine. If they need less, fine. And then you can mark that on a feed chart on the door, because we keep name cards on the door. If you've seen those in other episodes, those name cards you can mark the feed amounts on, and you can mark the bits and the bridles,
Mm-hmm.
and any other details. So a feed program is not going to be complicated with us. It is very much a keep it steady, keep it consistent. And then when a horse changes divisions, they go from Belmont to Saratoga back to Keeneland, Churchill, then they're on the same feed, same time schedule, consistency everywhere.
Okay, if I'm not mistaken, you had some say in that hallway feed a little bit. At least gave some advice on how they should put that together initially, right?
Yeah, I originally told Lee, I said, wouldn't it be great if they put all this together? And he's made a fortune off that feed. I think that's for me it's one of the greatest things that's ever happened to horse trainers.
Right.
Somebody that Yeah. What would happen beforehand is that I have an assistant one place, and they would mix it different than the assistant at the other place.
Yeah, sure.
And then I go in and have to coach them on, hey, no, I want 50% crimped oats. I want 50% sweet feed. I want you to make sure that there's flaxseed oil or flaxseed, all that, and Lee mixes it all. You open the bag, you drop it in, and it's been yeah, big difference for us.
Yeah, I bet. Okay, last question here, Kenny, and maybe next episode we can talk some 2-year-olds. I've watched the horses train many mornings at Oaklawn. How do clockers tell the horses apart? And how important are the work times when looking at the PPs?
Okay, great question. You're required as a trainer to report in your horses prior to workouts. They request that the track and the association request that we give a gap attendant, and it's in this case at Churchill Downs, Richard Conhorse is the gap attendant, who I've known Richard 4 decades, and we tell Richard who we're working, who's inside, who's outside. Then he radios it upstairs so that they know, and that's a pretty regular process at most racetracks to call it in. Sometimes the clockers are upstairs and you'll ring them by phone. Sometimes there's a telephone at Keeneland at the Gap. You can just pick it up. It rings directly to the clocker and you tell them the names. And you can't get a published workout unless you turn those in. And you need consistent published workouts. So their job is to catch them breaking off and finishing. And every now and then they'll miss one, or every now and then we won't call it in time. And but they typically adjust all of it. But workouts are definitely vital, and sometimes the different trainers are different. You might not have. Sometimes you might work slow from the pole to the wire and then gallop out strong and fast, and so that won't be published past the wire. It only be published from, let's say, the 3/8 to the wire, half to the wire, or 5/8 to the wire. But they're all different, and it'll depend on how a rider's sitting upon a horse, whether their hands are tight and holding, or whether they're all elbows and they're scrubbing, and that's the difference between breezing and handily, and it's and actually I don't know that the racing form differentiates between all that nowadays.
All right, Kenny. Well, you've nailed the Derby. You didn't quite handicap the Preakness, but you told us who was going to win. Do you think there's a chance we can get you to handicap the Belmont?
I'm not even going to handicap it. I'm going to tell you Sovereignty's going to win again.
Okay.
All right. Not only is he going to win, he's going to win easy.
All right. Who do you play with him? Any ideas?
I think you've got to play Journalism with him.
Okay.
But Journalism ran hard last time, and that's going to take a little juice out of him. I think Sovereignty's a big, strong horse, and I think he's going to handle Saratoga no problem. And of course, he's been up there a while already. My viewpoint of Journalism, he's a little bit smaller type horse than Sovereignty, but he's tough as nails. So that was impressive.
Yeah,
what he did last time,
no doubt.
For him to bust through that hole,
yep.
and Rispoli get through that hole to win anyway, pretty amazing. That horse has got a huge heart.
Yeah.
But I don't think he beats Sovereignty. I think Sovereignty's got every chance in the world to be horse of the year at the end of the season. He's headed the right direction, and he looks to me like a horse that's going to develop even into the Classic, into the fall.
There you go. All right. Well, you heard it here first.
So you know what I like about I've had my fingerprints on both of those two. I trained the grandsire of Sovereignty, Harlan's Holiday.
Okay.
And Journalism, I believe, is by Curlin, right? And
that's right.
I bought him as a yearling.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty proud of that.
Yeah, you ought to be. It's a couple good, pretty awesome horses. All right, Kenny. Well, thanks, man. We'll let you get back to your day. Obviously, you got a few things, few details you got to go over there. So appreciate your time.
So next week's episode we'll be doing from Saratoga.
Let's go.
I'll be at Saratoga Springs. I'm going into the Belmont. So next week's episode is going to be right in the trenches of this next leg, and maybe I'll have a different opinion because I'll be able to watch some of these horses up there train this week.
All right.
think I'm in there. I'm going to probably travel up Tuesday and be there Wednesday. Probably stay for well over a week plus or minus, and then back to Kentucky for Mystik Dan and Anna.
Okay.
And Gold could also run in the Stephen Foster as well. So we've got a pretty good lineup. And we're actually in a little bit of what I'd call a valley,
Yep.
because we've sold some horses. We're not all that active. Although we're going to run a bunch this weekend, and then I think you're going to really see us ramp up late summer and into the fall. I think the fall is going to be as good a fall as I've ever had.
All right.
So it's like that. It's typical. You have a busy spring. I had a busy winter, busy spring. I actually had a little window of a break. Last week we didn't do a podcast because I took a little road trip with some friends to some concerts, and then now we're ramping back up, and Saratoga, I think we're going to probably be a little bit light in the entry box up there, but as the season goes, the young horses are fantastic group of young horses. They're just now coming ready.
Love it, man. Well, thank you for listening to this episode of Horse Races Now. We'll be back next week from Saratoga.
All right.
Thanks, Kenny.
See you at the races.